Introducing 100 Days of Code with Treehouse. What is 100 Days of Code? It's a long-standing coding challenge created by Alex Callaway, and it's simple. Commit to learning every day for 100 days. The amount that you learn in that short time frame will change your life. Whether you want to level up your skills or jumpstart a new career, commit to the challenge. You'll be shocked by how much you learn and accomplish. The full support of the Treehouse community of students working with you. We'll be sending you motivational emails, clips from our 100 Days of Code podcast, featuring advice, tips and tricks from developers, and so much more. There's never been a better time to commit to your learning. Join us. Hello, welcome to another edition of Design Q&A. I know there's a lot of really sad, scary stuff going on right now, so I hope y'all are doing okay. I know that for myself, it's been really hard to keep my spirits up, but we're going to try to get a little bit excited about design just for the next 30 minutes or so and take our minds off of all the chaos. I just moved. I don't know if you watched these before, you'll see that my background has changed a little bit. I think I have a little sleepy kitty behind me. That's Butters. I was into South Park when I named her, clearly. So yeah, she's gonna hopefully just sit there really peacefully and be charming. So yeah, this is the September edition. Can you believe it? September, fall time. Pumpkin spice lattes. Yeah, I'll be that person talking about PSL time. So yeah, my name is Hope Armstrong. I'm a senior product designer and UX design teacher at Treehouse. Treehouse is the place to go if you want to learn how to design and develop websites and apps. We have a bunch of online courses. We have a monthly subscription and a 5-day trial if you want to check it, or a 7-day trial if you want to check it out. And if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat and I'll try to get to them. If not this live stream, then the next one. And for starters, I do have some pre-submitted questions that I'll get started with. So first question of the day, and on cue, here's my other cat, Puff. This is just like cat Q&A time. Sorry, there's no room for you right now. Shout out in the chat if you have cats that take over your desk. I would love to see some designs where you are explaining how to use grids when setting up your designs. Choices on how many columns or rows, like the basics of using grids, etc. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to use grids, and it's pretty exciting to use grids just because I think it checks that perfectionist in me of making sure everything's aligned and perfect. And it just kind of clarifies some things like consistent padding and things like that. But I know it's confusing. I also get confused about grids from time to time, so it's very natural. And in the course Typography for Designers, I use this article as a demo. So you can see here, this is using actually a baseline grid. So if I just zoom in and you look in Figma here, you can see there's a 32 pixel grid and then there's 3 columns. Oh, I just got super nervous as I started talking about grids. So I feel like there's this pressure to be perfect about it. So I just need to recenter myself. Yeah, so if you zoom in, you can see that there's these squares every 32 pixels. Everything is on the grid. So there's the line, there's the baseline, or in other words, the bottom of the text aligns with the grid. And so to come up with that 32 number, I just took the body text size, which is 20 pixels, and then I multiplied it by the line height, and then that's how I got the 32. So you have to do a tiny bit of math when you work with grids, probably where my anxiety comes from. Some math trauma. So yeah, so that's why there's a line every 32 pixels, if that makes sense. Let me remove my cat again. Sorry, Puff. What about this window? Whoops. What about that? She hasn't bothered me all morning, but she wants to be part of this live stream. And then for the column number, I just went for the average of 40 to 50 characters per line. So if I go back, you can see I just span the columns across, what is that, like, I don't know, 11 or 12 different squares. And came up with, 3 columns fit pretty comfortably in this desktop-sized artboard of 1440 pixels wide. So that's how I got my 3 columns. It's just a comfortable reading width for long form text. This is actually an excerpt from a book, so you could think of this as being a really long article. So it's pretty fun to lay out the text in these columns. But yeah, a less intense way of doing grids is actually the way that I prefer to do most of mine, and this is actually how a lot of apps are set up. Ignore the siren. So there's a max width for our in-app. This is actually our library page in the Treehouse app, for those of you who aren't familiar with our app. And all of the content is fitting at max in a 1200 pixel width. It's technically a 1260 pixel grid because there's 30 pixels of padding along the sides. So if you're a developer thinking of like box model and stuff, that will make more sense to you. But to simplify it, think of it as this is 1200 pixels wide. So the navigation fits snugly in here. So does the search bar. So does all the content. At least in the general sense. But if you look at the text here, it's not aligned. And if you look within the cards themselves, like they're not aligned to the boxes either. So as I said, in general, it's aligned to the grid, but then it starts to break down when you look more closely at the details. And that's fine because we wanted to maintain a 30 pixel gap in between each card. And so if you divide like 1200 by 3, but then you still want to maintain the 30 pixel grid lines, like you're going to fall off the grid. That's just the way the math works out. And same with the topic cards. That's the 4-column grid. So, a 4-column grid. So it's going to be off the grid a little bit. But in other ways, like all the padding within the cards is 30 pixels spacing. You can see that the icons and these little tag bubbles do align to the 30 pixels. Whoops. So there's 30 pixels in between here. That's just a really common unit that we use across our app. But there are exceptions. So design is like a whole field of having rules and then breaking rules, if you haven't noticed. That's why I think it's kind of fun, but it's also kind of confusing sometimes. The smaller cards would look really goofy, like with all that spacing in between. So to achieve better balance, we use 20 pixels in between the smaller cards. And so instead of using that like underlying grid on the artboard for this style of multi-column grids, I just use a ton of different rectangles. And so these are rectangles that are 30 pixels wide. So if you ever look at my design files, it just has a bunch of these like random fragments of rectangles that I use for spacing. And so that's how I do it. And of course you can use like auto layout and build in the spacing within that. You can add in the padding. So I don't always have to use the rectangles, but that's just how I personally prefer how to do it. That's just something I didn't learn to do that. I wonder if other people do that, but that's how I do it. Because then the design programs like automatically snap the components to it. So it makes it really easy to align everything perfectly. And then this is just a peek at our style guide that we use at Treehouse. So this is showing off our grid. And as I said, it's just really variable sizes depending on what the layout needs. And everything is 30 pixels in between. If you look down this kind of waterfall here. And so these are our utility classes for, 50% wide grid, 45% wide grid. And then you can mix and match. It doesn't have to be 2 columns, obviously. You could do 3 grid 33s to make 3 even columns. All right, so that's all I have for grids. Does anyone have any questions? No? Check in the chat. So yeah, I guess I'll go to the next question then. I was going through the Solving Problems with UX Design workshop on Treehouse. It deals with verifying whether a product idea would work or sell. I've heard about a field called UX strategy. Is this what this workshop is about? So great question. And this workshop has changed a bit through the year. So it is an older workshop, but then I reworked it last year. So originally it was more of a business workshop and really spoke to that entrepreneur audience who has this new idea for a product and wants to see if it's worthwhile to build into an actual product. And then I took it and created it into more of a workshop for designers. And so a lot of the content is the same, talking about creating a problem statement and seeing if it's a worthwhile problem to solve. Because that does relate to UX design, but I took out a lot of the extra stuff that was kind of unnecessary for the UX design track. So depending on when you took the workshop, it might be a little bit different. But yeah, you're totally right. It is really about UX strategy. And I actually had to Google this term because I personally wasn't really that familiar with the term UX strategy. I think with UX design, there's constantly new terms being created. And I think this one, it was made popular by a book that I haven't read, but I'll show it in a second because a lot of my research went back to this one book that really defines this field very well. But yeah, for those that are not familiar with this workshop, here it is in our app. It's a really quick 11-minute workshop. Like I said, I trimmed it down a lot to make it more applicable to UX designers. And it basically talks about that, early stage phase of UX research. It's commonly called the discovery phase. And so it's when you, define the problem, usually have a problem statement, such and such needs this thing, but they're struggling with these pain points. That's like generally how you would kind of phrase the problem statement. And then I go into, do people just say that they want the thing, but they don't really need the thing? What are their attitudes versus their behaviors? So kind of the basics of doing user research. And then developing a hypothesis. So I believe that X will happen if I create this thing. You state your assumptions and how you think that your solution will solve the problems that you're hearing about in your user research. And then so UX strategy is much more business oriented. So it has all the user needs and the technical capabilities that we think about when we think about UX design. But I think even more so, it has more of that business vision. So I'll explain that a bit more in this next slide. So validating a business idea is pretty much like making sure it's going to be some kind of profitable business for you. So how do you turn that shower idea that you have into a product? Maybe you're like, oh, lifeguards need some kind of entertainment system. And then you need to align that idea with the business goals. Maybe you already have existing products. Like, does this fit into all the other product offerings that you have. And then you can do really bare bones early stage MVP testing, and that stands for minimum viable product. And so it's a very stripped down version of your product idea. So obviously not the most amazing, fully featured lifeguard entertainment center idea, but something super simple that you can just test your gut idea or your gut feeling about it solving a problem in the world, which is bored lifeguards. And then, is there a market fit for your product? So, are lifeguards bored? Maybe they like staring at the waves. I don't know. Maybe there's not a problem to solve. Maybe you need to interview the lifeguards. I mean, I guess you don't really want to entertain a lifeguard. I think this is like a terrible idea because you don't want to distract them from their job. We don't need like Netflix for lifeguards, right? They need to be looking at the waves and seeing if anyone's drowning, obviously. So clearly a terrible product idea that I just randomly made up. And maybe lifeguards are already satisfied with another product. And so UX strategy is not just for designers. A lot of folks are interested in this, maybe startup founders, product managers, and so on. So yeah, definitely check out this book that goes really super into it. And I haven't read this book, but I trust the O'Reilly brand series or the book series because they're always coming up with really great books on design and development, and each book has a different animal on it. So I know it seems kind of random, but if you've ever seen the book with the animal on it, it's probably an O'Reilly book. Okay, just checking the chat again. I think we're good. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions or confused about anything. I know I'm just kind of like rushing through these slides here. Okay, I guess I'll take the next question here. Thank you all so much for sending me questions because I start thinking about the live stream and I just have no idea what to talk about. I'm like at a loss for what folks want to hear me talk about. So thank you so much for sending me questions because it gives me some kind of constraints, like, okay, I can focus on these topics. Okay, so no more questions so far. But yeah, so my question is how to grow before landing a job as a UX designer. Would love to see your suggestions. So my answer to this is really simple, and I hope it's not disappointing because I feel like it's probably something you've already heard and probably already know, but I really believe it is all about practicing. I know that the kinds of work that I created 10 years ago when I started going down this career path, I am very embarrassed by, and I will be showing you because I want y'all to see that there's hope. You don't have to. No one's really good at designing right out the gate. It's not some kind of inherent skill that you're born with. I think maybe, you develop an interest in something over time, and maybe like as a kid, someone says, oh, you're really good at color, you're really good at drawing. And then that kind of gives you that ego boost that maybe you can do it. And then you just end up in that track and you just get better the more hours that you put into it. And so you're going to make some really ugly stuff. So this is like probably 10 years old now. Very ugly mock-up that I made back when I was working at Carnegie Mellon University. And I think at the time, I'm trying to even remember the story. I think at the time they wanted to redesign the website, and I was taking a class, an evening design class on responsive design, I think it was. And I think that this was an assignment, or either I just did it for fun, I can't remember. But clearly there's a lot going on. So I think this was the tablet version on the left and then the desktop version on the right. And you can see I have a lot to learn about color theory. I mean, I came from an art school, so I knew color theory, but I think it's different, obviously, when painting something on a canvas versus designing a website for people to use. And so I was using this beige, kind of like a warm beige against a cool toned gray, which I find very jarring with my current perspective looking at this. And then the typography choice was kind of bland. Like, what is this, Arial? I don't know. And then I could have done something more fun with the header font. Is this Bodini maybe? I'm trying to think what this logo is set in, but I feel like I could have done a serif font for the headlines or something to tie it more into the brand. And then the leading between the lines here is super wide, way too wide. Oh, and then, there's shadows on the buttons. Some of that was probably back then. It was a cool thing to do. There are trends in web design, so that might not have looked too bad back then, but these days it looks really dated. And then the tablet, oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's so many buttons, right? Like, I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know what I should click on. There's the hierarchy is pretty flattened. So anyway, gotta have love for the things that we've done in the past. I guess I've learned from it, but just wanted to show you that you get better the more you work on these things. Here's some other old designs. It was kind of fun to go through the archives and find my old embarrassing work, but there's some fun stuff going on here with the illustrations, the little amoebas eating a pie, this guy catching a cookie, the cake tornado, a pie shooter, cookie sling. I don't know, I had some fun with it. But yeah, I think with color here, some of these colors are vibrating, and I think I had some more to learn about color. And, this is just... this one here, this was a cake, or I guess a bakery website, and I made it up because I didn't have enough work in my portfolio. So this wasn't a real bakery. I just needed to show an example of a mock-up I could do. And yeah, this is really old. But yeah, the more you design, the better you get. This is a really old mobile design. And again, had some good fun with the icons. They're not terrible, but there's some things I would change now. But over here in the menu, I would ideally give some more white space, maybe inset these so they're not like getting in the way of the dividers for the alphabetical order. And then for the right side, I think there's some usability issues because I don't know how I'd be able to select all these little tiny letters. So not just, visual design skills, but my UX skills had some growing to do. But again, I think this is my first mobile design, so it's fine. Yeah, so this wasn't a thing back when I got started out as a designer, but I've seen this really taken off these days. It's dailyui.co. If you go there, you can actually sign up and they'll send you a different design challenge each day. And so, yeah, the idea is that after 100 days, you get to be a better designer because you've made 100 different UIs. And this is purely just practicing your visual design skills. So this wouldn't be you really thinking about a UX problem to solve and like interviewing users and imagining all their different pain points and everything. It's very simplistic in that if you want to practice your visual design skills, you'll get better by practice. And so here you can see, this is a flight ticket that someone's designed. And for the first prompt, it's designing a sign-up form. And if you look on Dribbble or Twitter, you can go through the hashtags and you can see everyone's different take on this. And you can see it's just gone all the different directions you can imagine. I guess you just come up with a new product or a new brand, and then you create the sign-up form. So you can do whatever you want. So it gives you, some constraints, some high-level challenge, and then you can just have fun with it and see where it takes you. Okay, so no questions yet. I will keep chugging along. So yeah, I guess to your question, I don't know what specifically you'd like to grow in. I focused my little example on visual design because I think it's the most fun to like show the progression, and like show my embarrassing work through the years. And ideally, the stuff that you do in the past is going to look bad but ideally you'll see something that you would want to improve. And that's a good sign because that means that you've learned and you've grown. And, but maybe you want to work on your user research skills. So maybe you see a problem in the world and you interview some folks and you figure out their pain points, and maybe you do a write-up and say, hey, like, here's my affinity diagram. Here are all the themes that I'm seeing people say about bored lifeguards. Such a terrible example. And then I'm going to do a write-up on it, maybe start a blog and talk about, hey, here was my process for identifying this problem. I thought these folks had this problem, but it ended up being this other problem. And it came through my user interviews, or maybe I did some, what's it called? When you study people in their environment, ethnographic user research. And so you can just like observe people performing a task. Maybe you can ask them to do a diary study, where they just like what it sounds, like write, tell me about your day. Like how are you doing working from home? Tell me what you're struggling with. How are you feeling after? Well, you wouldn't ask these leading questions, but maybe they would tell you about how they're feeling like really drained after sitting at their desk all day. Maybe they took a break and did a little workout and then they felt better. I don't know. There's all different things you can do. And I guess you could start a blog where you have some writings about your design process and the things that you're discovering. And I think that's a good way to grow and actually like visibly show that progression. With the daily UI, you could post them online like a lot of people do on Dribbble.com or Twitter. And same with the blog, just a very public way of showing that you are growing, even though you maybe don't currently work as a UX designer. You're working on that skill. Okay, so one more check on the chat. Nope. Okay. So, tips for collaboration when you are the only designer on a small team. Yeah, so this one definitely resonates with me because that's me for most of my career. I've almost exclusively worked on small teams and often as the only designer. So here at Treehouse, I'm the only product designer. And then we do have 2 marketing designers. So I'm the only one on the product side, but not the only one in the company. And then in the past, I've been the only designer in the whole company. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. And I would say the number one thing is, of course, collaborate with non-designers. So I guess early on, I would think, oh, like it sucks that I can't do like a critique with other designers. Where am I going to get these other design ideas? And I mean, really great design ideas can come from anyone in the company. I mean, I've gotten a lot of really helpful ideas from developers. There's been more than once that I've shown this whole user flow and mock-up, and then they're like, well, I could actually automate this part of the flow. Like, you don't need to do all this running around for the user when we can just look it up, in the back end, like look up their email address. And if this thing is true, then show them this part of the UI instead of, asking the user to input something. So there's definitely ways where developers can streamline and improve the UX, just because they have like this idea of how to technically make something a lot easier than you even knew was possible. And then, product managers, they're often in those higher level executive meetings. They have a sense of their roadmap. They're doing some competitive analysis, seeing what other companies are doing in your space, in your product space. Customer support is constantly hearing from your users. They're hearing about bugs and frustrations. And so you can glean a lot of really helpful information from your support team. And then also the marketing team. So the marketing team is interacting with your users on social media, and they're, they have a good sense of your audience if they're doing like ad targeting, and probably have helped define the personas for the brands. And then the sales team, of course, is talking to different businesses and pitching the product if you have like a B2B offering or business to business offering. And so they're also getting feedback from those sales pitches that they're doing. So there's a lot of different information you can get from all these different folks that have different expertise. And so I have some tools for collaborating across a cross-functional team. One that I've used for several years is InVision. And basically, I just use the Sketch plugin, and it sends all my designs to the InVision app. And so if you've ever tried to screen share a giant user flow or like a series of mock-ups in a Zoom call or video conferencing call, it's really overwhelming and the person can't navigate on their own. And it's just so much easier to be able to send them a link, and then they can go through all this information at their own time and at their own pace. And so I know that the ability to share design files is getting integrated more in design tools like Figma and XD and stuff. But it's generally that. It's just I've been accustomed to using InVision. And so here I have this thread that was going on with one of the product managers, and later on one of the engineers chimed in, and we were talking about how we could do this gift card flow. So if you want to purchase a gift card, like what happens if they can't find the email because it's got spam filter? Like how can we help them get the information that they need? So just kind of figuring out some scenarios that I hadn't thought of. And then we also use Jira for all of our project management. So all the tasks that the engineering team does are entered into Jira as a ticket. And so on each ticket, I'll just share a link to my mockups and InVision. And here I'm just explaining how I organized the InVision board and walk them through a few of the sections of the screens. And sometimes I'll do different variations. Like here's one idea I have that I think would be pretty simple. Here's another idea that's a little bit more complicated. Can you let me know if this is technically feasible, or would it take us like 2 months to do this and we don't have that much time? And then maybe C is just some like off the wall idea. So just to give them a few different options, and then have the two developers that I tagged here just let me know, what they see from their perspective and what do they think is possible, and collaborate in that way. Because it's a trade-off, right? Like you want what's good for the user, but also like you don't want it to take forever, because then the developers aren't gonna be able to fix bugs that the support team's adding in, and like it's juggling all of the things at once, right? Oh, okay, I did get a question. Can you provide interview questions to ask participants for when doing user research? Yeah, well, I guess instead of general interview questions, it would have to be specific to whatever your project's about. So at the beginning of a user interview, it's good to ask like general questions about like how are they, how's their day, ask them about their like what they do for a living or where they're from, and just to kind of set the tone and have some really softball or lighthearted questions just to make it comfortable and personable. You don't want to like come in at them hard and seem really super serious, and then that makes them feel like it's an interview process. But yeah, for the actual questions that you want to get to, if you're doing something like a usability study, that would be, you have your prototype, or you have your app that you want to get feedback on. And that one, you don't really ask very pointed questions. You just want to get them to experience using the app and have them click around and see what draws their eye first. And so that's just more of, witnessing how they're interacting with the app, what catches their eye, what they click on first, second, third, what they click on and they're confused by. And then for that, you could ask questions like, if they're pausing, you could ask like, oh, what's on your mind right now, or what do you think, or what did you expect to happen there? And ideally for that kind of style, for a usability study, you'd be asking them to speak out loud. So it's more about listening to what they're thinking and less about asking a lot of questions, unless they're super quiet, and then you have to kind of pull information out of them. If you're doing a user interview, it really would be, it would be about what information you want to ask them about. I mean, it's very specific. I'm trying to like generalize it. I mean, you wouldn't want to ask leading questions like, would you, like, would you like using this product? Because they're probably going to want to please you and be like, yeah, I guess so. And then also you wouldn't want to ask them about how, like, a future action that they may take. Like, do you see yourself buying this? I mean, it just gets kind of tricky when you ask people, like, hypothetically what they might do in the future. It's better to hear stories about what they have done in the past. So there is a course, I'm forgetting the name, where I do give an example of a user interview. If you just search for user interview at the teamtreehouse.com, you can see it, and basically asking someone about their experience with dancing, because I was creating a hypothetical dancing app. So you can kind of get a sense for, you kind of have to beat around the bush and not specifically ask them about the topic at hand, but just get them to talk about the topic and how they feel about dancing. And maybe they go to a dancing class, and you can get them to talk about what they like about it, what they don't like about it. Again, you wouldn't want to ask. So a leading question would be, what do you not like about dance class? Because that implies there's something they don't like about it. Maybe they're really happy with their in-person dance class. Probably not during COVID, because I don't know anyone who's dancing in person right now. But again, like, you wouldn't want to create a problem where it doesn't exist. So that was kind of a long-winded answer. I hope that kind of gave you some pointers. But yeah, if you are a Treehouse user, you can check out an example user interview that I did, and I gave some ideas in there, so you can kind of learn by example. So yeah, so back to the collaboration lands that I started talking about. So yeah, Zeppelin is a tool that I've used specifically when collaborating with developers. And so this makes it easier for basically sharing your design without having to do a lot of redlining. Like back in the day, we did redlining where you basically share a mock-up, an image of your mock-up, and you would physically, or well, on the computer, write in like, this is 16 pixels padding around this card. This is this typeface, this text size, this color. It was super tedious, and you could create a whole like multi-page PDF to do the like developer handoff. But these days there's tools for this. So Zeppelin is one of them. This is again something that's being increasingly added into design tools like Adobe XD and Figma. but this is still a great standalone tool where you basically can, share this with your developer and they can click through and see, oh, this line is cornflower blue, 2 pixels high. And they could get the assets from here. They could download these SVGs. They could download these raster images, and they could see how big this text is, what the weight is, what the font is, and any number of things. So that would free up your time, as you're collaborating with a bunch of developers. You're the sole designer. You don't have time to make a 50-page redline document. You can just share the files with them. And then that way you can just sync it whenever you update things, and it's just a living, breathing documentation. And then this one is blurry on purpose. So don't expect it to progressively load and get crisper all of a sudden. I couldn't show the info on this one, but this is a tool called Miro, and it's a way to basically virtually do Post-it notes with a team. And so, maybe all the time people have great ideas, but they don't necessarily draw, or they don't really like drawing, and they're not a designer, so they don't get asked to do a sketch of something that they have an idea for. So when collaborating with non-designers, you can do something pretty low pressure, like an affinity diagram, like this is here. And basically, if you have a new feature idea or a new product idea, you can or maybe you just want to rework an existing experience, you can do a brainstorming session where everyone gets a different color Post-it, and then you can just do free form, 15 minutes, everyone write down their ideas and post it, and then you can find common themes. And it's a way for, everyone to get involved, no matter of their drawing abilities, and then it can just inform the designer's mock-up. So it's not so much about all the ideas have to come from the designer's brain. It's, great design great design ideas can come from all across your team. And it's a low pressure way of doing remote collaboration. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is a design sprint. So I've done this before and it worked really well to get ideas from other folks, as I've been saying. This is my theme. And so it was a cross-functional team. It was me and another designer, a few developers, I think a marketer, and then a product owner, which in our case for Treehouse was a teacher. And so we had a kickoff meeting for the first week, and then we got a lot of kind of just existing information about a problem that we wanted to solve. And then the next week, we set our goals, we asked questions to figure out the scope of the project. We did some, how might we solve this problem statements. And then we did some sketching. And there were a lot of people who were like, well, I don't sketch. It's going to look really bad. I'm not going to be able to visualize what I'm trying to think of. But everyone had to sketch. And there were some really great sketches and got some really good ideas written down. And then I think we did a vote. So everyone got to vote. And there were a couple or two ones that, there was one that got 3 votes and one that got 2 votes. And so the one that got 3 votes got turned into a prototype. So I did the prototype being the designer person on the team. And we did some user testing with usertesting.com and got some feedback. So that was a fun way of just involving the whole team in the brainstorming and sketching phase. So it wasn't just me and the other designer, working in a silo. We actually got to work with folks from other departments and led to some really good discussions. So this is just the overview of those tools that I mentioned. So I'll leave that up for a moment here in case you want to write it down, or if you have a link to the slide deck, you can click the links in there. But yeah, those are just some collaboration tools that I could think of off the top of my head. And as I said, I've worked as the sole designer, so I know how it is. It can be kind of isolating, but at the same time, I think it helps to know that not all of the design ideas have to come from you. They can come from people throughout the company too. So yeah, that's all I have for today, and I see that there aren't any more questions. So I guess if you have any last minute questions, pop them in the chat in the next minute. I'll just hang for just a minute, and then I do have to go. But any questions that I get, I'll probably just roll them into the next one. So the next one will be a spooky October version. Hopefully not too spooky. I feel like 2020 has already been very spooky. So yeah, otherwise I'll see y'all next month. All right, so I don't see any more questions, so I'm just going to end it here. And so thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to me talk a little bit about design. And thanks again for all of the great questions. I had fun putting this together, and I hope you found it helpful. So take care, and everyone stay safe out there, and make sure you wear a mask and be healthy, and try to focus on your mental health and practice gratitude. I don't know. I'm working on all these things too to try to figure out how to exist in this new world. So yeah, take care and good to see y'all. Bye.